on May 13, 2020 can be found on the City Hall website, the Philadelphia City Hall website. If you go there and you take a look at that, and you have some thoughts about the language that's in there, now's the time to write to Councilwoman Gautier, who is championing it. She's the one who is saying, I'm going to push this forward. And she saying, I'm going to push this forward. And she pulled the other people together. I say, go to that website, look at that resolution, look at that proposal, and offer your thoughts about it. I mean, we said from the beginning that people would, and one of the big things was that people wanted the names of the people, the MOVE family members in that draft. I think that has been done. I'm pretty sure that has been done. But you won't see that on the City Hall.
Congratulations to you on that process. And again, it's just a call for people time, policies, and the temple, as somebody talked about, our bodies being our temple. Just some dynamics that are at play right here where we live in this Delaware Valley. So set that up for us.
I've had the pleasure of being in the room with Zuline Mayfield, who is a true warrior in the city of Chester, Pennsylvania, on the issue of environmental racism. And I know her passion around it. And I'm pleased that she came back into this area a couple of years ago and has started fighting for this thing that she's been fighting for more than 30 years, man. When I think about the documentary, A Chester Story, that I did 15 years ago, and I go back and I look at think about the documentary, A Chester Story, that I did 15 years ago, and I go back and I look at what that was all about and the significance of some of those stories today. I'm just overwhelmed, Shamari. When I did A Chester Story 15 years ago, what I wanted to do was to give people a sense of the development of the Black community, how the Black community came to be in the city of Chester after the so-called Great Migration out of the South. How did it all happen for them? Kind of like when Harriet Washington, who wrote the book Medical Apartheid, says, we don't have food deserts, we have food swamps. Let's get some of this language right. Environmental racism isn't just about the pollution that you dump. It's about the violence that it's helped to be created in our communities. It's all of it. It's the whole environment. So environmental racism is like another form of segregation. You know what I mean? It's a way of keeping people contained in a nasty environment with pollution, with lack of food, with lack of resources, the whole environment. So Another Chester Story is actually a series of shorter stories that reflect on things like environmental racism. And see, we'll get an opportunity to see updates from 15 years ago. You're going to see, like you are in this segment, which you said 15 years ago. And then we're going to fast forward now. We're going to go, okay, well, what's being said right now? Shamari, 15 years ago, wasn't nobody talking about no coronavirus or COVID-19.
Right.
But what was going on was that the ground was being set by sloppy management, by politicians. They were allowing the trash to come in 15 years ago, which set the stage for what we're looking at right now.
Right. So when people talk about the pre-existing conditions that contribute to someone's susceptibility to coronavirus, let's use that as an example, because it could be anything virus.
It could be anything, man. It could be anything.
The pre-existing conditions and the social determinants of health that everybody wants to talk about from a public health sector are actually the things that we went to push back against 15 years ago. If you're growing up next to a trash and steam plant, or somebody's doing toxic dumping, or whatever the case may be, even just your environment is littered, things of that nature, those are how those preconditions are created, right? Preconditions don't just appear, they're created. And they're created by policies, and they're created by advocates who either win or lose battles. They're created by people who take bribes or payoffs in order to look the other way. And so we really, I'm hoping that people begin to understand that these words have a context.
Yes.
And that we are the stewards of pre-existing conditions, whether they're going to prosper or whether we're going to prevent them in our community. And we need to begin to become more proactive about these social determinants of health, because they're called social because you can do something about them. That's what the word social means. They're crafted. So anything you want to add before we weigh in after
commercial? Man, that, this idea that these things come out of nowhere, we got to stop acting like stuff comes out of nowhere. I'm like, no, there's a growth process. There's a
Mm.
developmental process here. So this first, and I'm only going to show 9 minutes of this first clip. But this stuff didn't come out of nowhere. This segment is called Another Chester Story, Pre-Existing Conditions in a COVID Covenant. And I call it that because there was a setup, there was some agreements that people made that created what we're looking at right now. People need to ask themselves, what are the conditions that we are setting up now for what will happen 15 years from now? I can show you what happened 15 years ago and what they said 15 years ago. And I can show you what the outcome of that is today. So what are we doing now? What are we agreeing to now that will set up another kind of covenant that will punish and beat and kill our people? We need to be asking these questions. So I'm looking forward to showing this when we come back.
And let's ask the question. So after the segment, if you want to join us, you know our call-in numbers. I'm at home at this point, so I don't have them top of mind. I'll make sure I share them. Somebody will text them to me so I can share for our listening audience. We definitely want to figure out in this age of COVID and Zoom and virtual, this, you know, how to make this as interactive and as connected as possible. So I look forward again. This is Wake Up with Word. Today with Brother Shamari. They had to go deep into the bullpen and pull a brother out to wake up this early. Solomon Jones will be returning next week, but I'm going to ask you to stay with us. It's a different flavor, but we're going to keep it in the same recipe, y'all. It's all about bringing Black life back to Black Philadelphia. So when we come back,